scope, you mentioned three examples. How many of these microloans are you doing? How many people are you? And how many loans go bad?
Oh, okay. We have projects in Kenya, Uganda. We have a pilot project in Burundi. We've got some projects, partner projects in Dominican Republic and in Nepal. We've worked a couple of other places. Our success rate in terms of microlending and people paying back varies from region to region. One of the things that The Reckoning does that other organizations do not do is we loan to younger people than typically micro-business organizations will loan to. We want to start, we love to target 18 to 25-year-olds. And a lot of organizations, micro-business organizations, will not loan to anyone younger than 21. And so what we've seen is in projects where we loan to, we also have a little more attrition or a little more problem when we loan to younger people, but we can live with that. In the United States of America, 30% of all new business startups fail in the first year. Okay? We've had different levels of success in our rounds. I think probably about the lowest that we've had one time was 78%. Where we didn't get full payment from, we got full payment from 78% and then partial payment from some of the others. And then we've had it as high as 99%, for instance, in the Dominican Republic. So it just kind of depends. In Kenya, we have about, I think, 130 businesses in our main area started. We just started a lending circle in Uganda, so that's a pilot project. We always start small and try to grow, from there. So in Uganda, we've got about 10 started. Beatrice, that Tim mentioned, the restaurant lady, she's from Uganda. We're also starting there the same thing. We feel like if you can work with someone about 18 years old and start them right in thinking about business, even though we'll have a little more attrition with them, we feel like that is definitely the way to go, because you've got to start breaking poverty at that, that level. So we'll start 10 or 20 new ones in Uganda where we're doing a bicycle taxi thing. With 18 to 25-year-olds, that'll be funded before the end of this year, and then we have about 200 partners in Nepal that we've helped there. Is that scope? Yeah.
I didn't know we were doing question and answer. It's my favorite thing in the world. Let me talk really quickly about lending circles and the way that The Reckoning is structured. That is, I'll tell you two things that are very unique to The Reckoning in terms of micro-enterprise, because we're actually not a traditional MFI, a microfinance institution, because of some of the ways that we are structured. The first way that we are different is, as donors, you never get your money back. All right? So, well done. So a lot of MFIs, the way they are structured is that people will make an investment. Someone will get a loan, they'll pay back their loan, and then that money has to come back to the Western world. In order to accomplish that, the overhead that is required, they end up charging 30, 40, 50, I've even heard as much as 70% interest on their micro loans, which is mental. The Reckoning, we lend, currently we're lending at 10%. The reason we keep our interest rates so low is because no money ever comes out of country. Once a loan is made and repaid, it actually becomes another loan in that country. So your donations have this multiplying effect on the ground that is really unheard of in the developed world. It is so cool. Here's the way our payback rate has been as high as 95% in some places, and the reason it's so good is because of the structure of the lending circle. I'll explain this very quickly. And I don't know how long we'll answer questions, but I love answering questions. The lending circle is set up like this. So we never lend money to an individual. We always lend to a group. So we typically, a lending circle is about 10 people, and they borrow one lump sum of money. Does that make sense? Clear as mud? So about 10 people will borrow one lump sum of money, although all the members of the group have various businesses and various percentages of that one lump sum. As a group, they're responsible to pay back that one amount. So here's how it works. So let's say Tim and I, and I'm going to say hello to our interns over here. This is Mary and Rachel. They're interns in Reckoning, just wrapping up their first 6 months. So let's say we were in a lending circle together, and I was a carpenter, Tim was a knife maker, you were doing farming, and you were a dancer. And so as a group, we borrowed one lump sum of money, but then suddenly Tim's not doing so well. So we get together once a week and we encourage one another, how's it going? And by the way, where's your percentage of, your repayments? And it's only Tim saying, that's not nice, so it's not going so good. As a group, we have a vested interest in the success of Tim's business. Does that make sense? So we have this built-in sort of system of encouragement. It's like this incubator for encouragement, for accountability, for ideas, because we all have a vested interest. We are tied together with the success of the other person's business in the group. Does that make sense? So that kind of speaks to some of the scope and the way that we're set up. I can talk about something a lot, but any more questions?
How do you find your investors? Do you go to them or do they come to you?
Our investors.
People that borrow.
Oh, people who borrow money. We always, when we start a new project, we always start small. When we open, let's say, a country, we go there and we start training first, and we start building relationships. So we've been going to Uganda, several times, talking to people, making relationships, meeting people from churches, and establishing relationship first, because we always work through indigenous partners. Because I don't believe I believe that God, let's use Uganda for an example, I believe that God has called Ugandans to help Uganda. And that we're there as their partners, but we want to respect what God is doing there. So we always work through indigenous partners, so sometimes it takes a while to make a level of relationship that we feel like, hey, this can be trusted. And then what we do is we start sometimes as small as starting 1 or 2 projects. Because what we found is, I'm in love with little. If you're faithful with little, God will make you faithful over much. And so what we found is if we can do 1 or 2 successful projects with people, those people end up becoming our leaders and can take the next people through their rounds. So that's actually what we did in Uganda. Started with someone, I went over and did some training for the Ugandan government and for some Christian business leaders. Met a guy, got to know him, made a loan to him. He was faithful. Began talking to him about the reckoning, saying, hey, why don't you help us? He feels a calling to that. We train people. We've written our own training material where we take principles from the scriptures, things that God has to say about success in business, and we take our partners through that training. So it's a really powerful opportunity to say, hey, this is what, so we talk about simple things like hard work and, careful planning and just very, very common themes that are sort of, or we would think they're common, and take them through that training, and that's a huge part of it, and then kind of turn them loose from there. So we tend then to have those people identify faithful people in the community that we can work with. And the power of the lending circle, too, is that if people know that they're responsible for the people who are in the lending circle with them, they're really picky about who they work with. They're really picky. They say, hey, we want people we can trust. If I was in it, and wanted to invite Caleb to be in it, I would want to make sure that he's trustworthy, because if he defaults on his loan, the group has to bear responsibility for that. Do you see? So it really provides a cool structure.